Hi, HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today we have a special guest. We're joined by Liz Ryan. Liz is a co-founder and CEO of Human Workplace and author of the Reinvention Roadmap. Liz, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. For Liz, for the very small amount of people in the world that don't know who you are, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your journey to where we are today.
Okay, well, I became an HR person, Chris, let's see, -3 years before you were born.
Good calculations.
And thank you. And kind of like you, I fell into HR. I never planned to be an HR person. Didn't really know very much about it. My training is classical music. I'm an opera singer. And I was waitressing and doing all that kind of stuff. And I only took an office job at all because I moved to Chicago when I was 19, and I didn't know when I moved there that you had to be 21 to serve alcohol in Illinois at that time. So I couldn't make any money. I got a job under the table, and then they had to let me go because they figured out I was 19, and I couldn't make any money waiting tables. So I had to go inside and get an office job for no money. You can imagine what office jobs paid back then.
Sure.
I was like, yikes. But I got into, luckily, a teensy-weensy little company, had about maybe 15 employees, but they were growing fast, a little bit like you. And I sort of grew with the company, as they used to say, and ended up in HR only because they had an election, a union election at the distribution plant that they had no idea what they were doing running this thing, hundreds of employees who were disgruntled. I'm 23, and they said, well, go down there, 50 miles south of Chicago, and figure out what these guys want and why they want this union. And it was the most trivial, obvious thing in the world to sit down with them, bring some donuts and say, what's going on?
Free
and
they just
exactly. And they just told me, and they had absolutely reasonable requests, insanely reasonable. And I said, oh my gosh, that's all it is. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's take care of it. Had the election, and they did not vote for a union. It was 98% against. So my boss says, well, now you're HR manager. So that was how that happened.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
Well, I ran around to all the workshops and all the seminars to learn about HR. And Chris, I was pretty horrified, be honest. In 1984, I was pretty horrified because at these workshops and trainings and certification classes and all this stuff, they were talking about everything that didn't matter at all. Everything trivial and stupid and bureaucratic, as though kind of out of a mental frame that HR was strictly compliance and that the only reason to have HR was to keep the company out of court. Mm. That's so interesting because our finance people have to make sure that we don't get sued by the customers, but their job is not to keep the company from getting sued by customers. Obviously, the salespeople have to make sure that we don't have legal disputes. The purchasing people have to make sure that we don't have legal disputes with vendors, but that's not the job. The job is to bring in amazing product, raw materials, have amazing relationships with vendors, and to grow everybody's fortunes and everybody's flame. I said, how do you do HR if you don't know what the hell you're doing? You take care of the people. So my door was open. I had the sweets, I had the box of tissues, availability, come in, what's going on, tell me what's going on. And then, of course, I wasn't sitting in my office waiting. I was out there in the lunchroom, on the loading dock, in the reception area, in the ladies' room. What's going on? What's going on? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? What can I do for you? How are we doing? Is this an okay place to work? What's good? What's bad? Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And that's what I did. And the company grew from maybe 15 employees to thousands, $1 million in sales when I started there to $300 million in annual sales. And I said, oh, okay, so I figured out how to do HR, which is don't do anything that they teach you in the classes.
It's so funny because what you're saying, it sounds ludicrous when you think about where it used to be. Sorry, where HR is now, right?
It's true. It's true. And unfortunately used to be, but Chris, a lot of people are still in that mode. And I would say here in the United States, the prevailing mindset around HR is still very much a compliance mindset. The only outreach that you really see is an annual, maybe quarterly, so-called, employee engagement survey, which is just complete BS. If you ask me, we could talk.
Yeah. Let's not get into that. We can get into that, but I just did a post yesterday about that because I just think it's nonsense.
So blah, 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 Chris.
Yeah.
I'm the HR person, so I got to be in on all the activities, right? So, I go to the softball games, company softball games. There's one guy on the softball team. I'm like, oh, who's that guy? And I end up dating one of the guys from the softball team who was my coworker, of course, because he works for the company. And I said to my boss, you know what? If it's not a cool thing with me and this guy from the softball team, then, I understand I'm HR manager. Maybe I should leave. And he's like, don't leave. And I'm like, well, if it doesn't work out with this guy, then it's going to be awkward and I'll probably get another job. But if it does work out, then people won't probably be into it because they'll be worried about my impartiality and so on. So I ended up leaving, going to a technology company called US Robotics, tiny company at the time. And I married that guy. We have 5 kids. We're married 25 years now. But the softball player, I think he was shortstop. But same thing, US Robotics, 100 employees. I went in and did my human brand of HR, make it an amazing place to work, no focus on compliance. Of course, you have to comply with the laws, but if you're doing a good job as an HR person, you never think about the laws because it goes without saying. And we grew from 100 employees to 10,000 employees, from 15 million bucks in sales to $3 billion in sales. And that's the Fortune 500 company that I reference in my bio that became a Fortune 500 company. Didn't start out that way. Mm-hmm. And the thing was, how are you doing? What are we doing wrong? How can we do it better? Bring your friends to work here. I hope you're feeling good today. I hope I'm doing what I need to be doing. That's how you do HR in my book.
Yeah. It seems so simple when you put it that way. And I feel like HR almost overcomplicates itself.
Always.
Whereas,
because it feels more real, Chris, when it's a program or a policy or an initiative or a blah, 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 instead of just walking around and saying, how's the energy? That's what we don't pay attention to. How's the energy in the room?
Mm. Yeah. Even just what you said earlier about going up to someone and saying, how are you today? No, a lot of people don't even a lot of HR leaders don't even step out of the office to do that. So very interesting. So what do you think about why did you stay in HR? What is it about HR that kept you there so long then?
Well, when my boss threw me in HR originally, I had been managing order processing, customer service, and the kind of what we call line departments and stuff. And I loved it. And I didn't want to change. And he told me, no, you're in HR. And I was so angry and upset. I was like, that lame department, the worst department that no one respects. He said, hey, come on, that's your opportunity to change that. And I said, well, I love to talk to the sales reps. I love to talk to the customers. And he said, well, who said you can't talk to the sales reps and the customers? There's no law that says HR people can't talk to customers. I said, oh my God, this guy has a different view. Why am I stuck in my outdated view? So once I got into HR, then I thought it was like a creative playground. I got to draw all the time. I got to organize events. I got to get to know people. I got to influence the way the company ran, not in terms of the processes and the business mechanics as much, but the culture, obviously, of the company. And I hadn't realized before that I could have that much influence. Mm-hmm. And make it an amazing place to work and make people really feel valued every single day. And after that, I had no desire to get out of HR. And I'm still really doing HR now. Yeah, sure.
And you touched on a point there, which I think really stood out to me as well. One of the reasons I'm still doing this, even though I was just putting together events, is I realized early on, even as a salesperson, the impact that HR can have on all areas of business. It's probably it's probably the only department in the organization that can have an impact everywhere and reach everyone. So, and I realize that, and that's why we do what we do here, because I know that the people that come to our events or listen to the podcast, the information they take away can actually affect tens of thousands of people. So it's a pretty good purpose
Absolutely.
to have. So moving on to where we are today, and what was it? When was the defining moment that you decided, you know what, I'm going to walk away from being a practitioner, and I'm going to start my own company? What was
the whole time that I was doing HR, drawing, doing events, doing conversations, those meetings about the union that didn't end up coming in. All of it, how to do orientation, how to do recruiting without putting people through nonsense and tedious, bureaucratic, insulting processes like, unfortunately, way too many employers use today. All of that stuff in the back of my mind was, I got to teach this. I got to teach this. To who? To other HR people. But when? Why would they care? Maybe they'll care. I just thought maybe at some point when I have time and I don't have little kids running around, maybe there'll be a way to get this message out and to teach other people how to do it. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of consulting, a lot of speaking. When I left the second company I worked for a long time, US Robotics, they were sold in 1997, Chris, and I was pregnant with my fourth child. So it was a perfect time to take a little time off. And I, did a lot of opera singing and whatever. But I thought, there's got to be a way to create some kind of platform. No real internet to speak of in 97, but I started writing columns for print publications, Chicago Sun-Times, and then the internet came in. It was Yahoo, and then, Business Week, and then LinkedIn and Forbes and all these other guys. And so it was like, okay, that's how you reach millions of people, and you get this message out, and you get to tell them, here's how you do it. And more importantly than how, Chris, here's freedom, permission from me, a corporate HR weenie, okay, that you do not have to do the standard crappy HR practices just because they've been around for 50 years. They're actually broken, and we can reinvent it differently. And you and I are not the only ones who feel that way. There's millions of other people with us. So let's just do it. And that sort of really turned the tide, starting about like maybe 5-6 years ago. Wow.
I love the fact that you, maybe a lot of people underestimate, a lot of the influencers that I've spoken to, they recognize that in terms of the, when you're in the prime time where blogging, the internet came in, you now can reach millions of people. The fact that you identified that on your own and saw that, that's huge. That's why you are where you are now, because you were in that perfect moment and you had a very clear message that also resonated with millions of people. So that was pretty good timing, and it was a pretty good timing, but also very amazing that you recognized that on your behalf, that you were at that perfect time of where things were changing from print to digital, and you were. Well,
I'm not going to say I was an early adopter, Chris. There was a story along the way. It was like 2009, and I wrote a little article for Yahoo. And it got on the homepage of Yahoo at some point and stayed there for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 hours, which is a pretty long time. Mm-hmm. And, I happened to have just written an ebook. A friend of mine talked me into writing an ebook, and I had it on the site for sale for $10. And she said, it doesn't matter if anybody really buys it. It'll be there. They can see that you have this ebook. And I was like, that's lame. I don't want to do that. Do it. I put it up there. The story hits Yahoo, and like 3,000 people buy my $10 ebook overnight while I was sleeping.
Wow.
Wake up in the morning, I was like, wait. It now. I see it, Chris.
So that was the defining moment then.
It wasn't really the defining moment. I was already getting stuff out there. I was writing for Business Week and I'm doing a lot of stuff. But in terms of that, it didn't have to be like a starving artist kind of hopeless, philosophical quest, but there could also be sustenance in it. And not just for me, but for anybody else who decides to kind of grow their thought leadership flame. I thought, okay, this will balance out. This will work out. We talk about the crank being how you make money, and the flame is really your passion, and they balance out.
Yeah. What's crazy, and this is why I love the work that you do now, is people still aren't aware of that. And I know it drives me mad.
Yeah, they're not.
They're still not aware of the power of social media, of content, and position themselves. And I know you've recently put out a few courses around this, right? And I'm like, pleased. There's so many people in my mind I know. I'm like, please buy that.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
It'll really help me. Luckily, I'm quite. Go on, sorry.
You said it, Chris. But the power of social media and the power of their own voice, and that's thing. So for so long, I felt like such a imposter. They talk about imposter syndrome. I think everybody has imposter syndrome. Certainly anybody who's stepping out of their comfort zone, because that's the only time, right? When you feel like an imposter is when you're out of your comfort zone. So here's me like faking it as an HR person. I have no degree, certainly no training in HR except for a bunch of little one-day seminars. And I'm an opera singer. And whenever I'm in a room with good acoustics, like the warehouse or the sample room, I'm singing because it's bouncing off the walls. And I felt like, oh, I don't even know what I'm doing. 20 years later, yeah, me not knowing what I was doing is a way to teach people how to do HR much better, cheaper, faster, more human, healthier, more sustainable, and frankly, more competitive and profitable way. But you don't see that initially. It's that feeling of fear. I'm sure you felt it at times.
100%. When you're saying that, by the way, before I got that job at 17, I was a professional breakdancer. So I went from being a professional breakdancer / skateboarder, artist, to being in a room with chief HR officers of, billion-dollar brands. So I was literally always had the feeling of imposter syndrome. Even now, when I'm on the podcast with people like yourself, sometimes I feel like that as well. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Speaking to, Liz or speaking to the other leaders that come on the show. And even at our events, like when we first had our first workshop and it was my company, it was the first time I turned up as the CEO of the business. And I was introducing, Coca-Cola, Shell, Google's, CEOs, chief HR officers at my event. I almost felt like, whose event is this? Is it mine? Yeah. Like I felt that was the imposter syndrome that I felt at the time. So I can certainly relate to you. And I also feel like with the podcast as well, it took me quite a few months to build the confidence up of do this, you know. Very interesting. Can I ask you a question? I wasn't going to ask this question because it doesn't really have too much to do with HR, but how did the LinkedIn influencer journey happen for you? How did you become a LinkedIn influencer?
I was writing for businessweek.com, and we just got an email that said, hey, we like your columns. Do you want to write some columns for LinkedIn? That's all. I didn't know they even had that program at first because it took a little while to catch hold. And, that's how it is when you write stories for publication. The same thing with someone from Business Week went to Kiplingers.com, which is a financial publication, and they wrote and said, hey, you want to write some columns for us? It has to do with the voice. Just like you have a very distinctive voice, it has to do with finding your voice. When I first started writing columns for the Chicago Sun-Times back in like 98, they were very namby-pamby, very blah, blah, blah. You should join your company's 401k plan for retirement. They were just, but I knew that wasn't, really my message, but it's just to get to your real voice. But now I don't care. I
Takes a lot of courage. Yeah.
Well, and also I'm like 30 years older than you. So, or not that much, but a lot. Not a lot.
Gave yourself away there.
Not quite. But you just grow into it. You get to the point where you try to care what people think, and you actually cannot care.
Mm-hmm. So where we are today, what would you say is your area of expertise?
Well, my area of expertise and my passion and my mission and what I teach is how to humanize work on the side of employers, the HR people, any kind of leader, how to create processes and procedures and an energy and messaging and a softness that is frankly kind of foreign to the traditional business mindset that lets a company thrive in every way. And my message that I'm getting out there is it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better for your customers, it's better for your shareholders. These people that you say that you are indebted to, specifically stakeholders, shareholders, will be better served by a human workplace than they will by the traditional, stodgy, buttoned-down, bureaucratic, rule-bound workplace that dehumanizes people. It also is an economic cost when you have these brilliant people and you don't let them bring all parts of themselves to work. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say, you know what, you have something going on at home that needs your attention, stay home and do your work from home. But there's fear. Oh, if we set a precedent, I might get in trouble. There's way too much fear, Chris, as you know, in the world. And HR, unfortunately, tends to become the ministers of fear. Mm-hmm. And No. We are the ministers of truth and lightness and hope and faith and encouragement. And it takes courage to do that and to step into that role, because you have to actually trust yourself, to trust your judgment and trust the people around you. But if you can't trust the people you hired through your rigorous hiring process, then you're sunk and you should just sell the business and go to the beach. That's the biggest problem that I see, is there's the policies and the messaging and the general tone and tenor of organizations is based on fear. It should be based on trust. These are not random strangers off the street. We chose them. We chose these employees. And if we still don't trust them after we chose them, it means we don't trust ourselves.
I think every single HR leader that I'm speaking will agree with you, but then most of them won't do anything about it.
And why won't they, Chris?
And that's what I was gonna ask you. Why
they won't do anything about it? Because fear is personal. And the hardest thing to admit these days, people will tell you their religion. They will tell you their sexuality. They will tell you all about their dogs, Chris, as you know, and their kitty cats. We have 2 dogs, 2 cats, a hedgehog. I will talk to you about them for days.
Hedgehog.
Freaking pygmy hedgehog.
Chris. I love the hedgehog. I wasn't expecting that bit.
What? Where'd you get that?
I wasn't expecting the turtle. I mean, I've got a turtle, by the way.
Friendly little pet. That's my son's hedgehog. But they will talk to you about their everything except the fear in the pit of their stomach. And I was the same way. I had a wonderful mentor, a psychologist who happened to work with us at US Robotics, had taught my CEO when the CEO was at grad school at the University of Chicago. And this mentor, Dr. Dave Thompson, he's passed on, but he would say, look for the fear, look for the fear. This is like 1988. And I would say,
wow.
Dave, and he'd say, you know why you don't know what I mean, Liz? Because you feel it and you don't recognize it as fear. He says, think about you're sitting in a meeting and somebody says something that challenges you in your role and your credibility. And I said, no, they don't do that. He says, that's bullshit. Of course they do. I said, oh yeah, no, they do. Sometimes they do. He says, and a line manager gets mad at you and they say, that's not your decision to make. Who the hell are you? How do you feel? I said, a wave of adrenaline flushes through my body and all the way through all my veins out to my fingertips. He goes, yeah, fear. That's fear. I said, I perceive it as anger. He goes, anger is fear. He says, your fury, your rage. What do you think at that moment? Do you think like the Dalai Lama? Oh, everything is fine and it's all no, you think I'm going to get that person and I am going to pound them into the ground somehow, like politically, and as HR VP I have the power to do that. Isn't that what you think? And yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is. Kind of truth to be told. He goes, okay, that's fear. He says every single working person feels that same fear in their body. We never talk about it. It's very embarrassing. The reason HR VPs and HR leaders do not tell the truth to their leaders is because, like every human being on earth, they feel fear. They're afraid to tell the truth in case something terrible happens. And what I learned by doing it thousands of times is that when you step through that fear, even to the CEO, even to CFO, many HR folks' worst enemy, you tell, or the general counsel, you say, this is what it is. This is why. The decision you're talking about would be a terrible, terrible decision for our company and would hurt us. You do not have data around that. You're an HR person. You are out there talking to the troops and you say, I am telling you, the employees will freak out. It will be very bad for us, for our employer brand, for our ability to hire and retain great people. And if you don't trust me to make that determination, I shouldn't be in this job.
Yeah. Some of the most successful leaders that I speak to, and they've said this multiple times on the show, is you have to be willing to lose your job. That's what they've said to me. You have to be willing to put yourself on the line for what's right for the organization and your employees. And I was like, whoa, okay. But those are the ones like yourself that are comfortable in doing that, and have gone past that fear. And these are a lot of the times they're veterans in the game.
Exactly.
And when I first heard that, I think it was Nestle's the chief HR officer said that to me. He said, Chris, I'm willing to lose my job to say what I feel and what's right for the business and for the employees. And I was like, whoa, I don't think many people will do that.
They write, people literally write comments, and it blows my mind, on LinkedIn, where their name and their profile picture is right there. And they say, I don't know anybody who would be brave enough to talk back to a CEO. And you say, why do you call it talking back? We're not 9-year-old students in school. You don't think of the consultant as coming in and talking back to the CEO. They pay consultants a lot of money, me and other people, to come in and tell them the truth that their own employees are afraid to tell them. And I say, your employees know this. What I'm telling you, they know this. Half of it I got from them. They're afraid to tell you, and that's not on them, that's on you, because you've created an environment where there's so much fear that your own highly paid, very talented, accomplished lieutenants cannot even tell you the truth. And that's the number one thing you need to work on.
It's amazing, right? Just what you just said is very interesting. And I have had quite a few CEOs in the conversation, and they want that feedback. They want to hear it.
They say it. They want it from you. But when they're sitting in a meeting and they're frustrated over something in the business that isn't going right, they want it in the abstract. But right then in that meeting, they revert. We all do. It's not just they revert to a 6-year-old kid and they stomp their foot and they say, I'm in charge and you tell me. And that is not a criticism. It's a normal human
reaction. Yeah. So when you work with companies, because this is a massive culture shift too, right? You know, what we're talking about, because many people have also been led that way themselves and be part of organizations. So that's sort of the way things run. Certainly wasn't the companies that I ran in, that I worked in. When you work with these companies, what's the first steps that you take with them?
Well, they don't call me, Chris, unless they have pain. Nobody calls me because everything is going perfectly, right? And if they call and they want to talk and they can't even get to the pain, which is, again, human, our training is to protect our wounds. And, people are not happy to say, here's what I'm struggling with, right? Doctor and say, here's where I have pain. But tough to call a human being and say, here's what I don't feel like is going perfectly well in my business, especially if it comes down to me and my leadership, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be like, well, my employees this, my employees that, my employees don't understand the business, my employees. I say, well, no, my brother, who hired the employees?
That's a great question.
Can we? But more to the point, if there isn't pain, if you're not aware of something that is bothering you right now, then there's nothing for us to talk about, and I couldn't take your money or use your time. If there's pain, then we have something to talk about. So it's what is that pain? What does it feel like? How does it hurt your business? How does it show up? How long has it been going on? What would you like to see in its place? What would the nirvana scenario look like to you where this pain is gone? What would that do for your business? So a lot of clarity around where you are versus where you want to be. And then you can start to have conversations about fear and trust. And I often ask people to ship me their orientation materials, their recruitment materials, their messaging, their leadership, their management. And it's right there as plain as day, Chris. If the message coming down is you must, you will, you better not even think about it. You better never, you'll get in trouble, you'll get fired. The handbook looks like it was written by a team of 87 lawyers. It's just, there is a message that is all about fear and control. And there's another message that is like, hey, we don't really know what we're doing. If we knew what we were doing, we wouldn't need any help, right? But we're hiring, you're brilliant, and you're going to fill in a piece of this puzzle that we don't already know the answer to. And that's when you have a great collaborative relationship. I mean, job ads are disgusting. Job advertisements, we need somebody with 3 years of this and 2 years of this, and the selected candidate will have blah, blah, blah. Selected candidate, why are you talking to me in the third person? Like I'm not even, but really, it's a very strong message.
Yeah. Well, I got my job, very quickly. When I got my job, they said you have to have a minimum of 2 years experience in sales and you have to have a degree. And I turned up with no sales experience and no degree, and end up being, I got the job, even though they said no to me. I said, I work for free, and ended up getting the job that way. And they paid me at the end of the month, but I ended up working there for 10 years and building one of the most profitable businesses they had. So technically I shouldn't have been there according to that job spec that came in.
And you gave them such a gift, not just, of course, by your presence for 10 years, but by hopefully opening their eyes to that. I still have a little tiny slip of paper I cut out of the Chicago Tribune newspaper back in like 1989. It's all yellow now and curled up, but it was a job advert that I cut out with an X-Acto knife because it was so stupid. It said administrative assistant needed must have Word Perfect 5.0. That was an old word processing program, Chris, Word Perfect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But you have to have 5.0. You mustn't have 4.0.
They're saying you have to have that version of the software.
We couldn't possibly train you up on 5.0. You must have it. Are you out of your mind?
Crazy.
A half a day training or less. Any smart person that has used any word processing program could easily learn this stupid Word Perfect 5.0 in minutes. So it's a blinders on. It's like the inability to think broadly beyond, well, the hiring manager told me that he has to have Word Perfect 5.0, and who am I to disagree with him?
Yeah.
You're a person who's supposed to be an expert on the talent market, and you say, that's a ridiculous requirement. I'm taking it out of the job advert.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that point, you talk about it that in your book, right? Reinvention Roadmap.
Yes.
You talk about the traditional job search approach is pretty much dead.
Dead.
Doesn't work anymore.
Work.
Pretty much trusting your employer with your career is crazy.
I don't recommend it, Chris.
To do. Could you share some of the tools that you discuss in the book with us?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Chris. So I wrote Reinvention Roadmap because, I had a publisher that was interested in publishing a book by me because I was writing stuff, columns. And he said, what do you want to write about? And I said, well, it's got to be one of two things. It's either going to be a book for civilians, regular people, how to manage your career, how to get a job through non-traditional means, how to feel your power and find your path, decide what kind of career you want, and then go out and get it through, these sort of radical tactics. Or it's got to be a book about how to build your own human workplace and, HR book. And he said, well, we're going to go with the civilian book because there's a lot more of them.
It's such a publisher response. Where can we make the most money? Who's the biggest audience?
Exactly. Who's the biggest audience? And I had that book in me. It was dying to come out. So I wrote Reinvention Roadmap, and great grace of God, it's selling very well. It's the idea about, first you have to decide what you want to do. And we talk you through how to do that by looking back at your own path in life. This is not just, what do I think that people would accept me as, but what do I want to do, which is a big shift. Because unlike you, Chris, most people don't have the confidence right out of the gate to say, well, I know I'm good at this, so employers should be able to see that. Of course, we have to show them how you're good at the things that you're good at and why you're passionate about them, but they are teachable. They are dying to hire people who are interested in the same things they're interested in, and that's what gets lost in the job ads. So you decide what you want to do, you brand yourself for the jobs you want. Human voiced resume is the resume that we invented to put across. It's got a human voice in it, uses complete sentences. You would never call yourself in a human voiced resume, for instance, a results-oriented professional with...
This is the thing I wanted to talk to you about. I love that because I saw your recent article on the Forbes about that. Yeah. It really made me laugh, chuckle, because every time I go on LinkedIn, you see innovator or thought leader, disruptor. And it's like, what does that mean?
Who cares? Writing, your resume or your LinkedIn profile is not looking in the mirror and telling people what you like about your own reflection. If I see one more disruptor, Chris, on LinkedIn.
Disruptor's the main one, isn't it? Kills me.
Mogul, maven, guru, your mom. What? No. Tell these people what you can do for them prospectively, what you can do for them. And that also does not mean I'm smart, I'm loyal, I'm trustworthy, like a Boy Scout. They don't care what you think about yourself. What they know is what you want to do, why or how you do it, and maybe one story that talks about when you did something cool in that realm. It's very easy, but it's a shift in mindset. What goes along with the human voice resume, because you can't send one of these human voice resumes right into the black hole, the ATS, the applicant tracking system. They won't find it. They won't find you in there because they're using keyword searching algorithms. You have to send it directly to the desk through the post of your hiring manager. That means you have to spend a little time on LinkedIn finding your guy, which is not even hard to do.
Nope. I found you. Yeah.
You have to find your person, but it's easy to do. You find them, not in IBM, not in a multinational. It might be hard, but if the company is reasonable size up to say 5,000 employees, you can probably find that person. You make a list of target employers. and you go after your hiring manager, the manager most likely to hire you in each of those firms, and you send them that resume, human voice resume, with another document called a pain letter. And they go through the post and they land on the desk. That's a physical object. Now they have to deal with it. They have to get their little slicer thingy out. They have to envelope. And what do you do, Chris, in the pain letter? You're not saying, here's me, me, me. This poor person, their brain is full, they're overstressed. You're talking about them, their favorite topic. They don't get enough acknowledgement from their wife, their husband, their sweetheart. You are going to come out and say, hey, good on you. I saw your press release that you guys just passed this huge milestone that's absolutely magnificent. You got a green building award from the city of Portsmouth or whatever. It's fantastic. And they're reading. Now they're reading because you care about them. And that's the key. Yeah.
Do you know what I also do? This is a tip for everyone. On LinkedIn, you can see people's interests at the bottom of their LinkedIn page. You know, people put their interests in there. So what I used to do when I was sort of working with clients is actually look at their interests. And whenever I would send my messages to them, I'd be like, oh, I see that you play ice hockey and that you did this to this. And then all of a sudden my responses to my emails went up by like 50% because I actually took a customized approach and contacted them and took time to understand their interests. I even had a conversation with someone about speed walking because it's something my mum was doing at the time and they were into it, and and it kind of just kicked off. We spent about 10 minutes speaking before he asked me, why are you calling me?
So brilliant. You got it organically as a teenager. That's so awesome.
Yeah. And when you mention a human voice resume, do you outline this in the book? Is there like a template?
Oh,
what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, it's not a template in the sense that it's human, so it's going to be,
Of course. Yeah.
Like there's examples that I think Melissa James is in there. It starts with what you have to decide what you want to do. And that's the thing most people do not do before they write a resume or update their resume. They say, well, let me brand myself for everything I could do. It's not compelling. It's not, because you don't look like you have any plan or any path. You look like you're sort of out there saying, I have peaches, plums, and pears. What sort of fruits would you gentlemen like? And that's a terrible branding approach. You have to go out there as you. When I used to do career coaching years ago, in between the corporate stuff and what I'm doing now, we would have folks go and get a headshot, a professional studio headshot, looking beautiful, beautiful lighting. It does wonders, for your self-esteem. You get a beautiful
Yeah.
And they would put it on LinkedIn and they would say, it's a gorgeous photo, but I don't feel like that person. And I would say, you know what? It takes time to grow into your headshot. It really takes.
I love that.
You have to let it, just like a theatrical part, you have to let it sift. You have to, eventually you will feel like that headshot and your power will be insane because other people already see you that way.
Yeah. And on that point of branding, one of the things I'm seeing now, which is happening more and more now, is that HR leaders are having to build their own personal brand, both inside and more now outside of their organization. And it's an area which I see quite a few of them struggling with. Especially, I'll give you a good example. I know speaking to some of the CHROs over at LinkedIn that when they joined the business, it was very fundamental. Jeff was like, I want you to be the face of our company. So when people think about working at LinkedIn, they know who you are. And then they know who's leading the HR team and the way. And many HR leaders struggle with that. So I wonder if you've got any advice for HR leaders of how they can build their personal brand, not just inside, because that's traditionally what they're trying to do anyway, but externally for their customers and their future employees.
Yes. For a long time, HR people wanted to stay kind of behind the veil and hidden.
Yeah, exactly.
Candidates. And fear of candidates will kill an HR practice, because that's the number one thing you can't be afraid of, is having people talk to you at a networking event or at your kid's school or whatever and say, hey, I don't know if you guys are hiring. And you're going to say, I don't know if we are either for the particular skill set that you have. That's all on our website. But if you have questions for me about a job ad that you see or something there, in other words, I'm not, because our kids go to school together, I'm not going to slide you in past the goal. That doesn't work that way. Yeah. But if I can be a resource to you about something you're not sure of, oh my gosh, of course. And if you're in contact with people that are job hunting, you ever want to grab a cup of coffee and hear about our company or what we're doing, of course, I'll do that. In terms of now that HR people are kind of getting the message and how to build their brand outside, We happen to have, as you mentioned, Chris, a course right on that topic.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's so important. It's so important.
People don't know how to do it. And what I'm telling them in there is what I did and what we did at Human Workplace, and it worked. And so Grow Your Thought Leadership Flame, it's an online course, and it starts off with, what's your message? What are you trying to get out there? It's reflective. We don't often think. That's why you see all the disruptors, mavens, and the innovators, because they don't want to take the time to look. It's really hard to stop and look at yourself and say, what am I trying to be? That's a hard thing. And so help people through that process. And once they get clear on that, then they're not embarrassed about it anymore.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said earlier with the fear, right? Because I always ask them, why don't you do more LinkedIn posts? Why don't you do any videos? You're looking for that particular candidate. Why don't you do a video about it? So put it on LinkedIn. Say we're looking for, and they're like, yeah, exactly. They want to bring in a production team and a professional audio video crew. They want to get.
It doesn't look better.
No.
I made a video last Friday. I put on LinkedIn.
In the snow.
In the snow.
Yeah.
And it was my kid.
I love that. Because
I got a kid, 22, and like you has not been to university. He's a musician and he travels all over the world and he does all this stuff. And he goes, Mom, let's make a video. It's snowing. And I said, all right. We go.
It's so real, right? It's so authentic.
It's obviously snowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Take it. And we're there by the planter. It's winter. There's no plants in it. And it was actually opening day for the Rockies, our baseball team, Chris. My husband and my older son were down there in a blizzard, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And I said, so this is like our little tribute. We're spending 10 minutes in the snow and on them, toughing it out for the Rockies, who lost, but, and made a video in the snow. And I love the homemade videos more than studio videos because why does it have to be produced? I have a message for other people. Whatever I do, Chris, I'm going to be middle-aged. I'm going to look how I look. Whatever I do, it's going to be me. Why would I want to, gussy that up and make it less like me?
I think that's one thing I learned from one of my first guests on the show was JT O'Donnell.
Yeah.
You probably know very well, of course. And she said to me, that's why I named my company Work It Daily. Stop thinking about it. Just put it out there. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be all glossy. Doesn't have to be the best editing. I edit all of my videos. I had to learn how to edit. I'm not the best editor in the world. That's right. The podcasts, they're not they're not TV quality, let's say, but people don't care about that.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I mean, if you're going to have a company called Human Workplace, then you better, not try to do a lot of glitz and,
make it human.
Yeah, make it human, right.
Yeah, amazing. So where we are now then, of course, we've spoken about the employee side of how things have changed, right? How can the businesses prepare then for this big shift?
The shift, well, it is a mindset. And it takes time, and often HR people tell me, HR leaders tell me they feel very alone in their company, that when they adopt this mindset and they want to bring this human workplace idea in, it can feel very isolating. And of course, who could blame them? It's scary. HR people have been told for years, you're just an HR person. You're not a real business person. That used to wound me. That used to hurt me because I came from the business side before I was in HR, but it doesn't matter. It's just such an obvious stick to throw. It's such an obvious knife jab. Of course they're going to go, oh, you're not even an HR person. So as we toughen up and step into our power and step into our headshot, you end up saying, is that the best you can do, really? To call me not, really, you think you're going to calling me not a serious business person? My darling, if you don't think that taking care of the employees and making sure they get what they need is important to the business, then, there's really nothing for us to talk about. This us versus them. If it's us versus them, we're screwed. Then we should just sell the business, because if it's us versus our employees, we have failed. And we just launched actually a different course, our first one that is appropriate for HR folks, not an HR course. We have those and they're all in the production process now in terms of getting them on our website, but it's called Get Ahead, and it's a course for working people at their desks to learn how to thrive at their job. And it's all about building internal networks and setting goals and planning and managing time, not the old fashioned time management, like stuff 5 tasks into the next 5 minutes, but really looking at your purpose every day and getting altitude on your job and taking breaks and drinking water. It's a healthier, sort of more sustainable way to really feel your power in your job. And that's the first course that we've launched on our site that has group registration. So 150 people in a company or 400 people could take the course together, or
because no matter what level of the business, it applies to everyone.
Any level. It's from top strategic all the way down to super baby entry level, because it's the idea of, wow, the way that I will do this job is fundamentally different than the way the person in the next workstation will do the same job. That's crazy. We've had the mindset that this is the job and everybody does it the same,
yeah.
Interchangeable cogs in the machine. And now we're saying, how do you put your stamp on your job? How do you bring your gifts and your worldview?
A sense of purpose as well, right? And
exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, that leads us quite nicely on to the quickfire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions. And you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers.
I'm ADD. I can't wait that long.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in your field?
I was afraid of what other people would think about my shoddy background.
Amazing. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
When you feel afraid, speak your truth. God, or whoever you believe in, Mother Nature, the laws of physics, is pushing you. When you feel that fear, speak your truth. Other people need to hear it.
Great. I was gonna say, what's one book you could recommend to our audience and why? But you can do more than one.
I'm going to recommend an unbelievable book that blew my mind. It's a book by an anthropologist who I think is also a neurosurgeon called Leonard Shlain. And it's called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, Chris. The Alphabet versus the Goddess. I had the book for several years before I read it because I'm not into like New Age, or I thought I wasn't. And I had made a vow that I would never read another book with the word goddess in the title. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there we go. The power of the goddess. I was like, ew, gross. But I read this book on a plane and I had to stop reading it because every 5 or 6 pages I would get to something else and I would go, and all the other passengers would look at me in alarm. The reason I was freaking out about this book is because Leonard Shlain went and researched early human settlements in like what was present day Turkey, and very, very early, they call the Paleolithic era. And this is before the fortresses and walled cities and all that stuff. And it was before slavery, and it was before patriarchy, and it was before all of the bad stuff. People were just chilling, and they were domesticating animals, and they were growing crops, and they were taking care of each other. And every dwelling was painted inside and outside with imagery, and nature was everything. And men and women collaborated, and it was healthy, and there was no hierarchy. And what came in was the alphabet, which some people still feel is the greatest innovation or technology advancement in human history. All of a sudden, there is communication that can only happen if you understand the code. So rather than ideograms that anybody can say that looks like a sheep, that looks like a bird, now it's these symbols that stand for sounds, and the sounds make words. And so it's the higher class, the priests and the leaders who understand it. Moses coming down with the tablet saying, I understand what's on here, you guys don't, that puts me above you. And by the way, this is not the word of me, this is the word of God in the sky who's looking at you and judging you. And all of a sudden, in the next 2,500 years, human civilization changes dramatically. You got wars, you've got slavery, you've got subjugation of women, and a lot of really bad stuff. So when I read the book, I was shocked and depressed at the same time. But I think in some ways we're starting to come out of that a little bit, just awareness-wise, and say it doesn't have to be that way. And work is the perfect place to talk about why it doesn't have to be that way.
I was thinking that exactly. I was thinking that as you were talking about how that applies to the workplace of, top-down management, hierarchy.
You are nothing. When I was a little temp in New York, I went to music school in New York, and I was a temp when I was 18, and I was sitting in the conference room, and the job they gave me to do, Chris, the most mindless thing. Remember those old, you might not remember, they used to have inter-office envelopes, and they were oversized envelopes that were like,
no, I don't remember that.
No, they had these big inter-office envelopes, and you would stick memos in them, and the mailroom would deliver them all around the building. Because this is
okay.
So they're big envelopes, and they have horizontal lines where you write the next person's name who's supposed to get the envelope. They could be reused like 100 times. And then you scratch out the previous name. Very primitive. Like books in school when you're a little kid and there's some name who had the book before you. So my job is to stick these memos in these envelopes and write the next name of the recipient in the line. So what do? I'm a little artist like you, and I do calligraphy. And I do little fancy lettering with a black Flair pen, Sharpie, and I do these beautiful things. All of a sudden, I start getting the envelopes back in the conference room, and somebody has taken an X-Acto knife and they cut out their name. Because it's their name in calligraphy. They cut it out, so there's a hole in the envelope now, but they put it like with a push pin on their cubicle wall or something, because it's fun. It's like a little art around their name. So I just brought this teensy little bit of art and life and color to work as a temp. And what happens, my supervisor comes in, she goes, they said you can't do calligraphy anymore because it obviously takes more time than just scribbling the name, and you shouldn't be wasting time. And I said, F this. This is just ridiculous. It doesn't take time. You want to time me? I'm the fastest calligrapher on the planet.
I knew that would be your response.
For free. You pay me $4 an hour. Nope, you can't do it. And I said, okay, this is so broken. That was my first, it wasn't even a full-time job. And I said, why would they be so hateful and so awful to try to stamp out art when it shows up organically?
Yeah, and you found a very unique creative way of putting it into play. Just that little things that will cheer up someone's day, right?
Absolutely. And it's HR people have endless possibilities and opportunities to do that. It's almost overwhelming how many little touch points we have to just listen and to reinforce. Just to say to an employee, I was in a meeting and they were talking about this project that you did. Honestly, I don't even understand what it was, but you rocked it, because everybody was saying how incredible you are. And they just smile and they say, thank you so much.
For the rest of the month, the next 3 or 4 months, they're going to be gleaming with joy, working harder, being more energetic. Yeah, amazing. I didn't get to my last questions because we got carried away. No problem. Could you share, if there's could you share one internet resource that you use to increase your own productivity or stay up to date with current events? Or you can say more than one.
Everybody already uses LinkedIn. Internet resource. Let me think about that.
Or any sort of technologies that you use?
30 seconds. Oh, I'm not as internety. I'm not as devicey as some people. Gosh, I'm coming up short. I mean, everyone has Spotify, right?
Yeah. So one is anyone, 99.9% of people say LinkedIn. So you kind of already guessed that one.
Yeah. On LinkedIn, there's some cool tools, but if I'm gonna download something, it's more likely to be a game, so I can just have a game play.
Perfect. Well, you do need a break, so we'll just put all the best games in there for everyone. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, look, Liz, you've given us some amazing advice, and I absolutely love your energy and enthusiasm as well. It kind of definitely wears off on people, and it's definitely worn off on me. I thought I was the most energetic person in the room, but you've beat me.
Oh, don't be silly, Chris.
My nickname as a kid was Adrenaline. Just to give you that.
Was it?
That was actually my nickname.
I could see you. I could see you spray painting that on the side of a warehouse, Chris.
I did. Yeah. No, I did genuinely, and I got told off for it many times. That's actually a real story.
Gosh, I love it. Now you got me going. I'm going to have to do a little artwork around that, Chris. And
I'm going to send you one. I've committed now on the podcast. I'm going to send you some artwork. I don't know what of yet, but we're going to do it. Before we part, give our listeners one parting piece of guidance, and also the best place to learn more about the work that you're doing.
Okay, one piece of guidance, like a tip.
Mm-hmm. Is there one piece of guidance for all of the HR leaders out there that listen?
A piece of guidance for the HR leaders out there. When your instinct leans in the direction of the right thing and you have people telling you that's not the business-like answer because it's going to cost a little more money, it's going to take a little more time, or it's not going to be uniform, which is not the same as fair or ethical, but we love uniformity in the business world, get used to telling them, let's keep talking about it. Because you're not going to win the argument in the moment. And we tend to see business very transactionally. You win, I lose. Go on to the next issue. Go on to the next issue. No, keep it open. Keep it open. Keep the conversation open. You say, we'll keep talking about it. Do not give in so fast. HR people tend to give in. You know why? Because they want to go on to the next issue. Well, I'll win the next one. It's not a win-lose. It's a sharing experience, sharing your energy, sharing your viewpoint, your experience. Say, let's keep talking about it. I used to say that thousands of times a day because otherwise I would have said, okay, all right, I'll do what you want me to do. It sucks. I don't feel good about it, but I'll just do it because no, you say, we'll keep talking about it. You do not have to make every decision in the moment. We are wired to just be fast twitch muscles. Boom, 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 boom. Nope, nope, nope. You say, let's talk about it again next week. Slow it down, and people will gradually come to their senses as they rise out of fear.
Fantastic. And the best place for us, and the best place for us to learn more about the work and your programs and workshops.
Humanworkplace.com, Chris. That's
workplace.com. Easy. I was going to try and get you to sing at some point on here, but you.
Oh yeah. Are you a singer, Chris?
No, I'm not. That's the one thing I'm a dancer. So if you sing, I can dance.
Ooh. Oh, that sounds brilliant. I see us on stage, man.
We'll do it. We'll just go to one of these. Brilliant. We'll turn up to one of the HR conferences.
Love it.
Be prepared.
Love it.
And no problem. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Guys, head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find all of the show notes on the episode. Everything we've been talking about will be included in the show notes and the timestamps. Liz, thank you again for sharing your journey with us. And I wish you all the best until we next meet.
And you too. Take care.